Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. All right, at this point, we're going to move on to public comment. As most of you know who've been here before, public comment is just that. It is a chance for citizens to tell us whatever is on their mind. You get 3 minutes. We ask for your name and address, and again, it's a one-way public comment, not a conversation. So we'll start off with Jason Metzger, name, address, and 3 minutes.
Good evening, Jason Metzger, 5475 Oxford Chase Way. Thank you. As I've expressed before, I really appreciate Council, the Mayor, and staff's work to make Dunwoody a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly community. And today I'd like to especially thank Mayor Davis for his work on that, and congratulate him on today being Mike Davis Day. So I'm here to discuss one of the agenda items, which is the improvements to a section of Tilly Mill Road. And I just saw on the staff memo that the staff is recommending alternate 3, which is bike lanes for a small piece of it, and then sharrows. And I encourage council to go for alternate 2A, which is bike lanes for the entire section. With a slight modification, I recommend 10-foot lanes, which would narrow the additional space required on neighboring residents' properties somewhat, because I know that's a concern, and then also allow for keeping the center lane, the center turn lane. I actually was hit on my bicycle on Tilly Mill in the section just north of that, so not the section that we're looking at improving right now, but the section just north of that lady coming out of her residence at Holland Drive as I was heading northbound on Tilly Mill. And one of the things that she expressed to me several times was that people move so fast, they drive so quickly down Tilly Mill, that when she sees her opportunity to go, she's got to gun it to get out of her road without getting rear-ended. And so I think, you know, having these bike lanes, the narrower lanes and the bike lanes will not only obviously protect the cyclists, but also slow down traffic and make it easier for the residents along that road to pull out of their driveways and pull out of their side streets. There's a lot of community centers along Tilly Mill Road and on either, you know, different ends, shopping, synagogues, churches, the MJCCA, schools that are routine destinations, and I believe the citizens of Dunwoody want alternatives to getting to these destinations besides in their vehicles, safe alternatives. And the sidewalk will definitely help with that, but adding the bicycle lanes will also help with that. So, and you know, my wife and my child, they love riding their bicycles too. I don't mind sharrows too much, but they definitely will not be riding in a sharrow. They do not want to share the lane with a vehicle.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger.
Thank you. And I think most of the community doesn't want to do that either. So
all right, thank you very much. Next name up is Bob Dallas. You know the rules, Bob.
I think I do. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Bob Dallas. I live at 1445 Valley View Road, and I too am here to talk about Tilly Mill Road and that project. Just by way of background, I've worked with many of you when I was Governor's Office of Highway Safety Director. Also as a planning commissioner, not only for Dunwoody, but DeKalb County for a number of years. I currently serve on the MARTA board, and I also have worked on numerous transportation plans for both DeKalb County and the city of Dunwoody. And I make my statements from that perspective that first and foremost to me, safety is number one. And looking at this road segment and what's being proposed, that segment from North Peachtree to Cherry improves safety significantly. It adds better sidewalks on both sides, and it adds the bike lanes. And I look at it from this perspective, and that is as the most vulnerable user to pedestrian. By providing that space of a bike lane to the pedestrian, you're really creating a sense of safety, and you'll get more people walking because of that. And so that's important to recognize. The segment, however, from Charing over through to Womack, not so much. And the reason for that is because when you look at that, the lanes continue to remain wide. And everybody who ever drives that segment, and since we go to Kingswood, we go down that road quite a bit at the speed limit, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of the reason is because the road is really designed for a higher speed limit, so people will naturally drive faster. And I can say this as a person who's put together hundreds of programs to get people to slow down as highway safety director. Wider lanes equal faster speeds. If you want to slow the speed down, narrow them. Every study I've read suggests that. And so I pass that on to you. So that's the first thing. If you want to slow folks down, narrow the lanes. Secondly, sharrows versus bike lanes. You know, sharrows just mean that the bicyclist is going to be in the lane with the motorist. So when the bicycle is going along, you're slowing that motorist down. Whereas in contrast with the bike lane, both are traveling at their proper speed limits, and there is not a impediment of the bicyclist to the motorist. And the third thing is that when you look at this area, it is a connecting segment. You're connecting to Marcus Center, you're connecting Dunwoody Elementary School, Dunwoody High School, Kingswood United Methodist Church to Brooklyn Park. So it just makes perfect sense to continue the bike lane for the entire segment so people don't go from bike lane into sharrows. So with that, what I would suggest is the option that allows for bike lanes to be continued, narrowing the lanes, not by a lot, but maintaining a center turn lane and having narrow lanes will make this a safer segment by slowing people down. And I have to say this, we want to encourage people to come out and enjoy the outdoors. I mean, when the weather's great, like we've had these past couple of weeks, this is the way to do it. It will look, when it's all said and done, just like what Mount Vernon does from Ashford Dunwoody Road over to Sandy Springs. The way that was redone, that's how this will look. I drive that segment quite often as well. It works better now. It's safer. People drive slower, and that's all we're asking.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
this.
Dallas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Next name up is Charles Bolicon. Did I say that right? In 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Charles Bolicon. I live at 1136 Trailwich Lane. Every day I bike to school, and it is enjoyable. And I have biked on Tilly Mill. There's numerous community centers down on there. Most notably the MJCCA, which I travel to a lot in the summer. And it is quite scary on that road. The cars are going really fast. There's not a lot of room to maneuver. And I have friends who refuse to bike down that road for that reason. And I just thought the addition of more of the wider bike lanes is, without the sharrows, would really ensure people being safer, which I think is, you know, your number one priority, or to have people be safe on the road. That's all.
Thanks. Next name up is Chris Kravakis. Donna Cardenas.
Good evening, Mayor Davis, Council. My name is Donna Cardenas. I live at 2221 Sandcroft Court in the Kingsley subdivision. I'd like to speak on the bike lanes for Tilly Mill. I really want to just echo what has been said already. I couldn't say it any better. Everything was perfectly mentioned. The other day I rode with my son out of my neighborhood just to go to Kroger to buy some milk, actually, and ride home. And I would love to be able to do that more often because we've got work going on in our neighborhood. We have to go through the detail, and because he's only 8, I decided to go Tilly Mill rather than all the hills inside the neighborhood, and it's very scary, so we stay on the sidewalk as much as possible. But it would be nice if we had a dedicated bike lane to do that. So I really just want to encourage you to really give that some thought. Some people do it just for enjoyment. Other people use the bike lanes to get to and from the many businesses that we have here in the Dunwoody area, or go to school. And so I think they're important. And one side note that I would really like to mention, I actually ride a lot. And one of the things that I've noticed happens sometimes is bike lanes are put in, but then out of the blue, all of a sudden they just end, and I'm stuck in all of a sudden having to merge with a car. And it's very scary and very dangerous, and I'm a very experienced rider, and it still is unnerving to have to be merging with cars. So when you are putting a plan together, if that's something that you could consider and make sure that the bike lanes continue at least to the next stopping point, not just in the middle of nowhere. And that also echoes this idea of sharrows. It's, I mean, nobody really understands what that is here, not having that, and to have to all of a sudden understand what that means, I think is going to spell disaster for future. So thank you for your time.
Good, thank you. That's all we. All right, next one up is number 18, sidewalk alternatives with Mindy Sanders.
Good evening, everybody. So in conjunction with the paving on Tilly Mill, sidewalks are also proposed for this section of road. Back in May, 3 concepts were presented to council. They all provided the same, I guess, width of pedestrian facilities, but they all varied in the degree to which they served bicyclists. From that meeting, we were given direction to look at some other modifications to those 3 alternatives, mainly looking at whether or not we could reduce the center turn lane, extending that center turn lane up to the, Kingswood United Methodist Church's driveway, and seeing where we could minimize any kind of right-of-way acquisition. So we still remain to have the 3 main alternatives. Alternative 1, to remind you, is shared lanes throughout the whole section. Alternative 2 would include bike lanes along the entire section, and alternative 3 would have bike lanes in the south part where it's only 2 lanes, and where it widens up to 3 lanes is shared facility. So, but looking at where we could make those modifications, we did end up with at least 8 alternatives, which are attached to the memo. Looking at, I'll start with reducing the center turn lane. That was one where it would also minimize right-of-way impacts by reducing that width. We found that we'd really looking at turning movement counts and also looking at just observations in the morning, you really could only reduce half of it, since half of it does act as a left turn lane, especially throughout the morning. So we don't really care to pursue that. Also, we made observations at the KMC, and also spoke with their school director, and we didn't really feel after that it was as much of a need for based on the cost. And then, so in general, where you can eliminate or at least reduce right-of-way is definitely in the width of the road. We did also even look at an extreme example where we'd set and hold the existing right-of-way on the west side and widen towards the east if needed. And that did increase the cost, as you can imagine, since that would replace the existing sidewalk on the east side. So weighing all these things, we still do support alternative 3. There are some great, everyone here that spoke earlier has some great words to say about the bike lanes and why they should go the whole way, and it's not something that I would argue against, but weighing those benefits with the impacts to the right-of-way impacts along there and to the homeowners, we still support 3A or 3. There is one modification that we did look at when we were looking at where we could minimize right-of-way. We did look at right within the curve itself, where I'm going to bring up a graphic or a photo. This was not included in the memo, but just so you know what I'm talking about. There's this section here. This is the north lane right here, or northbound lane. where this existing sidewalk makes a choke point, and it's really uncomfortable for pedestrians, and there seems like there'd be an opportunity here. There's a lot of right-of-way on this side of the road where you could just extend it or widen out towards the east on this, just for that small section, and reduce the right-of-way impacts on the other side. But other than that, that is the direction we're recommending. But if anyone has any?
Option, Mindy, as far as that curve aspect?
Oh yes, I mean any kind of it's essentially would be flattening that curve a little bit, which does add to the
Helps
safety
everybody.
of yeah.
Just so I'm sure where we're at right there, from where that picture was taken, my back, or immediately behind my back, is the curb cut into Kingswood off of Tilly Mill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is an option that could be with any of these. It could also be implemented in 2A, but since we were kind of going in the direction of 3, we only looked at it for 3A, and so the costs to do that are incorporated into the cost for 3A, but that additional cost to do that is roughly $50,000, so that could be incorporated into any of those options as well. So let's
I
start.
just have a quick question about the chart for now.
Okay.
On the table, the number of properties requiring negotiation includes easement, and then the number of right-of-way parcels. Am I to presume that the difference between the two are just the ones that you need easements from, or am I presuming wrong? So, for example, on 3A, it's 21 number of properties requiring negotiations, and then it's 13 number of right-of-way parcels. So, can you clarify what you mean
Right.
there?
So we did want to distinguish where we have actual purchasing a property versus where we just have to negotiate for a temporary easement. There's a little less money, and sometimes a lot more or fewer negotiations if you don't have to step into that right-of-way acquisition. So to answer your question, we did want to distinguish that.
Okay.
Hope that answered that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mindy, we heard a lot of options or a lot of discussion about alternate 3A and the fact that there's a possibility that the lanes could be reduced down to 10 feet, which would then allow room for bike lanes. Can you give us your opinion of that possibility?
Well, we have not added 10-foot lanes in the city other than for some short stretches where we just want to squeeze something in. So this is a long stretch where I want to make a decision or give my advice right here. But in general, I mean, 11-foot lanes, 12-foot lanes is almost the standard for many of Metro Atlanta, and there is a movement towards going towards a narrower lane, and so we're comfortable with 11 for sure.
But with the center lane being there, isn't there a level of safety then? I mean, that we could, the 10-foot for each lane of traffic as well as the center lane, which is going to stay also at 10, I think there's enough of a cushion, just me personally, that 10 would work, which would then allow room for the bike lanes to be included. But you're not comfortable with that?
Well, I don't want to make that statement. Right. I really would like direction of whether or not to put bike lanes or not, and then we can make those kind of engineering decisions, those really finite decisions. But if it does make a difference, then please let me know.
All right, thank you. I'd like to see that evaluated if I could somehow, because I'm leaning that way myself.
I'd just like to comment on that. I think, one thing you need to realize is that turn lane backs up. I mean, it backs up when the college is loading. So if you narrow that turn lane and the adjacent travel lane, northbound approaching the Womack intersection, you've got 2 lanes of traffic that are parallel, that are, that turn lane will back up 20 cars at times, at those loading times. So I'm nervous about trying to skinny those down too much, thinking that you've got a safety factor there when it's that heavily loaded when the school is going in. And I think the other thing to point out is I believe that is a truck route in and out of, it's sort of a designated arterial truck route, and that's another reason to shy away from narrowing this road any from a standard 12-foot lane in my book.
Is in the intersection redo, is there not at the corner, well, crossing Tilly Mill at North Peachtree, a pedestrian refuge? Is there I mean, I'm trying to remember the image. It was so long ago. Is there going to be a pedestrian refuge across Tilly Mill or no?
There's nothing planned right now
Okay.
for at that
Okay.
the intersection. There's small, like the pork chop type islands that go out that are offset of a right turn lane. Those type of islands.
Mindy, when we discussed this on May 26th, I had favored alternative 1 because alternative 1 closely fits, actually most closely fits our master transportation plan that quite a large number of citizens and council agreed upon. And our problem with, trying to add bike lanes to a road that didn't call for bike lanes means that we're just going to change these master plans on the fly. Alternative 1 already requires about 2 feet of right-of-way. If I look at the map that came with your memo, it's an approximate number. But it looks like that right-of-way is just for the sidewalk, that extra right-of-way, right?
Correct. That's how we've defined where we'll have right-of-way. We've only extended it to the back of the sidewalk just where our infrastructure could incorporate it.
Mhm.
And then anything on any kind of grading we would obtain an easement for.
Okay. So 3A, just from your pictures that was in our packet, looks like it's not encroaching in the right-of-way any more than alternative 1, that it's still at best just the sidewalk. Am I missing something? How does 1 compare to 3A?
So with 1, you will end up having do the math here. We'll have 14 minimum 14-foot lanes in either direction, just as a basic shared facility. It would allow enough room for a car to pass a bicyclist, assuming they're on the closer to that curb, without encroaching into the opposing traffic lanes. So at a minimum, there's 14-foot lanes, and for our proposed 3A, we're showing 11-foot lanes with 14-foot sidewalks, so it's a difference of a foot in either direction. 4-foot bike lanes, so it's a total of 30-foot curb to curb or gutter to gutter, and then and 28 in the shared lane. So it's a difference of 2 foot total of the asphalt.
But the would-be widening of the roadway by 2 feet
Between the two,
between alternative 1 and 3A?
yes.
And, okay. And then alternative 1, while you mentioned would be 14-foot lanes, why couldn't that be 11-foot lanes? And combine that, say, we did this on Dunwoody Village Parkway. You and I have talked about this, the header curb, where we were tight on space. Why not put in the header curb and lower the width of the lane to 11 feet? Seems like that would make bike lanes within the pavement that's there, would it not?
So those are all design features that we can tweak to minimize things. We haven't looked at the stormwater, done any kind of stormwater design to know what kind of how much water is going to be in the gutter. There's a term called gutter spread that would play a role here, and how much basically if the header curb would negatively impact any kind of things. But yeah, those are things that we could consider when we're doing design.
I guess, and I just want to be clear, I'm all for striping bike lanes when it fits within the existing roadway. On a road that we've said we're not going to have a dedicated bike lane, that tells the citizens who own property along there we're not going to come in and widen this, pull the curb back. And I think people rely on those plans, and so now when we come up and say, no, now we'd like to pull the curb back so that we can accommodate bike lanes, and it wasn't on the original plan.
I would like to clarify something, though, that even option 1A, we would need to widen the road to accommodate the shared lanes. Without, if we just had 11-foot lanes and no additional buffer, whether it's bike lanes or just additional width, it really wouldn't meet the definition of a shared facility. So at a minimum, even just in which, to even meet our CTP plan, we'd have to widen between 2 and 4 feet along the length of it. So
Right. But in looking at the map of the property, the right-of-way that a resident along there gives up, what they're giving up becomes sidewalk. And so I will tell you, the residents there are all for the sidewalk, and if it means they have to give up a little bit of land for the sidewalk, they're for that. They just don't want to give up the land for a bike lane when we didn't call for a bike lane on that. So I'm hopeful that creative design, like the header curb, things like that, that we could still accommodate the bike lane, but then not take any more right-of-way except what's required for the sidewalk. That's what I'm looking for, that compromise in there.
I think there was hopefully some opportunity to find ways such as a header curb or even reducing the lanes once we look into it more.
Perfect. While we're on that topic, our standard design is for a 2-foot landscape strip. Have we looked at, in the areas where it's really, really tight, of not having the landscape strip so that we're not having as much impact on the residents, particularly if you're trying to squeeze a bike lane in?
Yeah, well, it's something, again, it's another thing the tool that we would have, but on a busy road, just to feel, as a pedestrian, it is uncomfortable when you're walking immediately next to a roadway, especially if there's no buffer that the bike lane does prevent.
What I was trying to do was suggest, is that space that we could then move the curb in so that you've got room for the bike lane, but still be in that what would have been landscape and sidewalk space. And if the bike lane then gives you that safety buffer, seems like, again, back to the compromise, seems like this helps us accommodate all that we need to do, that with the header curb. And then, let's see. So that's it. Thank you.
I'll weigh in and try to get all these thoughts as concise as possible, but, and y'all probably heard this before, when you have some cyclists will ride any road. They don't need a bike lane, they don't need sharrows, they will flow with the traffic. That's a small number of folks. It increases greatly if you put a bike lane. Some people will say, I just feel more comfortable if I have my space in my lane, cars are over there, I'm in my bike lane, and you'll get more usage when you add a bike lane. You go the next step, if you add a multi-use trail, there's a group of people that says, I won't even ride in the bike lane. If there's any cars near me, I'm not going to do that. I'll only ride a multi-use trail. So from my standpoint, if we're going to, if one of the goals is to increase ridership, multi-use trail is the ultimate. That's not an option here. But the next one is bike lane. And my fear is that if we say, well, we're going to put a bike lane on a section and sharrows on another section, is the limiting factor the people that just won't ride in a bike lane? And I think that's the concern you've got. Yeah, I know there's a center turn lane and cars can get around you more easily and all that, but from my standpoint, we've got at one end of this an intersection that we're putting in that has bike lanes, at the other end of College, and if there's a section of road that needs to be bicycle friendly, this fits the demographic for what we would need. So from my standpoint, I would love to find a way to put a bike lane in the entire section of that road. I look at the cost and the complete streets analysis, and kind of between the the options, we're looking at $100,000 increments, which from my standpoint, if we're going to do this road once, and we probably won't do it again for 30 years, it's worth spending the money to do it right the first time.
This is more of a general question about sharrowed lanes. Where they're used, and again, I've already said, if we can do it within the pavement striping, that's the better way to go. But when I'm on Ashford Dunwoody in Brookhaven, I see Sharrow on Ashford Dunwoody. When I'm down at Emory University, another college, I see Sharrows. I don't see dedicated bike lanes. So why is a Sharrow considered such the enemy?
I mean, I can probably address that as a cyclist. It's the equivalent of saying they're speeding on my street, and the government comes and goes, well, we'll just put a speed limit sign. And you go, well, they're ignoring it. And you go, well, you know, that's all we're doing. So Sharrows are one of those. It's, you know, it's a marker painted on the streets. Does it give me any more comfort level as a cyclist? No. You know, I won't choose. In other words, if they said, we're going to add Sharrows to these roads, will that make you more comfortable riding on them? The answer's nah, that to me would be laughable kind of thing. No more than you said, are you worried about speeding on 285? And they go, well, they're speeding out there. And they go, oh, but we're going to fix that. We're going to add another speed limit sign. Do you think that'll help? And you go, no. So that's, from a cyclist perspective, you know, is it nice? Yeah. Is it window dressing mainly? Yeah. You know.
But from a driver's perspective, my personal experience only has been it increases my awareness that I may encounter a bicyclist on that route.
You know.
And I think that's what the Sharrow's for. I'm thinking the Sharrow's for the drivers, not necessarily the cyclist.
Yeah. But, you know, but I would put it the other way, which is a bicycle can be on any road. I mean, you don't need a Sharrow to look out for bicycles. You got to look out for bicycles anyway.
But that means that that road has been designated in some way as...
Yeah, it's like a deer crossing, you know. Are you going to slow down? You know, not really.
And Dunwoody, every road's a deer crossing.
Well, but that I guess that's my point, is you put a sign and says deer crossing, are people slowing down for the deer, or is that just to appease somebody that hit a deer once, you know? And so anyway, to me, it's window dressing. You know, if the government feels like it needs to do it, that's fine. From this cyclist perspective, you know, not so much.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
I think my response is also they can be added to existing facilities pretty easily. But in this case, we are putting in curb and gutter and stormwater facilities, so there is an opportunity to do more than that here.
So I struggle with it's hard to retrofit a city, and I struggle with the impact of what this means for the homeowners, because I've said often, I talked about it when we were talking about Chamblee Dunwoody, where I eventually voted for bike lanes years later, is that it's not just that we're taking their property or we're buying their property. It's that for 40 or more years, DeKalb County didn't even pave their road. And so there's no anticipation that anything's going to change. And in the cases of our busiest streets where we have single-family homes, we are literally pushing civilization, whether it's sidewalks, bike lanes, or the road, closer to their homes, closer to their front door. And that's a big struggle for me. I actually think bike lanes help the drivers the most because it gets many of the cyclists out of the driving lane and into the bike lanes, and it keeps the flow of traffic going. And so, and as someone who uses Chamblee Dunwoody a dozen times a day, getting stuck behind a bicyclist and you can't pass because there's traffic coming and you have to be 3 feet away and all that really slows down traffic. There's, you know, the cyclist can go pretty fast, but when traffic can move and there's a cyclist in front of you and you can't. But Terry said something about a map, which I don't seem to have in mind. Was there a map today or no? The master transportation. Right. Has a no, I know. Oh, I thought you meant on this thing.
There's a drawing, the memo at the end of the memo.
Oh, I missed it. Oh, there you go. Because I think I'd have to see a more site-specific map, you know, property by property, to sort of understand.
Okay.
What it means. I need to look. And I actually think the sidewalks, I understand the feeling of safety by having the grass thing, but it really looks better without it visually. I think it does. I think it looks smooth. Maybe I like modern and smooth. I don't know, but I think it looks smoother, and I'd actually rather have all that in concrete, even if, you know, you were going to use the same amount. And so I'd like to see us look at some creative solutions that maybe allows for a bike lane, but maybe we can use the existing right away or not have to impact the neighbors too much, because it's a real struggle for me to, I need to see it. So, thanks.
Is that clear now?
I'm afraid not. I'm hearing, well, I'm more hearing push for bike lanes where we can, but not at the expense of the right-of-way. So if there are modifications that can be made, such as trading some of the buffer for the landscape, or different types of curbing, and it's also a possibility that a lot of these concepts were based on GIS data, which is not accurate, and it could have a play either way. So all we do know that there's a better possibility if the less you widen it, that you don't have to purchase right away. But it's something that I think we do need to move forward with this project, and just try to because we do have to acquire these parcels as needed, and also during this, so that's one thing I did want to get kind of a nod for at least one of these, which I'm not sure if I'm getting yet, but one thing I do need is we do have a design contract for this project with Wolverton and Associates, and it was under the $50,000 limit, and this was a big effort on their part to even look at all these different concepts and try to find some kind of cost data, and it was outside of their scope. And then looking at any kind of preliminary design and final design that might involve anything towards the east, there would be an additional scope change on that. So I am seeking approval for an additional $25,000 for their contract.
Move to approve.
Mindy, just a follow up to that. I'm in favor of the amendment. When are we planning? What's the goal to go to construction on this project?
We want to get right away. Well, right now the budget, or next year's budget, includes right away acquisition.
So 16 has right away, and we thinking construction in 17.
So we'd have to still come before you with a construction budget and a construction layout. In the meantime, we can really hammer out some of those really fine details, fine-tuning of this, to minimize the concerns that you've all expressed here.
Would this amendment to the contract to take them up to from $48,000 to $74,000, would there be money in there? Is that for one design, or could we do like we've mentioned here to have a couple of design options?
I would say, well, that's more of a final design, and also some of that survey money as well. So that's kind of a one-time
Survey's
thing.
not going to change, but
No, that's a one-time cost though, to get more accurate survey on the eastern side. But no, that only would include one final design. But I suppose if you were to add some funding to that you could get some more fine-tuning of one or two of these alternates.
And I guess I'm beating around the bush. Are we going to hear back from you, okay, this concept, we're now narrowing it down from whatever, 6 or 7 concepts down to 2 or 3, or this costs this much and this costs this much? In other words, what's our next move after this?
Well, if that's the wish of the council to come back, but I mean, we do need to get a design, or at least
you got to know what you're building, obviously.
Or at least to start the right-of-way process to moving. But again, I do generally hear that there is a support for the best facility that can be implemented while trying to reduce the right-of-way acquisition, and so.
Yeah, I think that's everybody's goal. It's just
if that.
Some people lean a little more towards right-of-way remaining, and some people lean a little more to bike lanes and sidewalks, taking that away. And I guess, some of it's what's the cost difference to get between those two.
Doug, what I heard is, and if you think about alternative 1 being modified to have to narrow the lanes to allow for bike lanes and some creative curbing and creative on landscape if that's needed. That makes that very, very similar to Alternative 3, I think, based on what I read of it. So I think we're kind of all saying the same thing, but somewhere in that middle, I think, is where we are with that. Is that correct, Mindy?
Well, I've heard more just maintaining a bike lane throughout.
Right.
Is what I've heard from.
Right, and that's where I lean. Go ahead and get
Eileen.
whatever you need.
Correct, me too.
And I mean, we could find that we at least have a layout, and if we hit a trouble, or if we run into someone where we're trying to obtain an easement from, and we have an issue, maybe we can make design amendments for particular parcels. That's happened on other projects as well. But just having a basic goal of adding or not adding this type of facility would be good to hear a consensus about.
All right. Be sure to let us know if this is not enough funding as time goes by, because we got to get it right.
Okay.
And whatever the right is of 4 people out of 7. And then lastly, will we be doing any major repair work on the pavement if it's going to be a year and a half before we actually do this to repair parts of Tilly Mill, the pavement, in this same section?
Yeah, we'll have to do some, pothole repairs as needed. I don't know if this has been specifically looked at as patching in the meantime.
Yeah, I think there are areas of that that's pretty bad. When I was putting up campaign signs, I noticed how bad some of them were. So anyway, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mindy. All right, let's move on to number 19.